Hi everyone, welcome to Education Alchemists YouTube channel. Today's video is a conversation with Professor Gilly Salmon and with Will Moindrot and Tia Asgari, who are educational developers in the Centre of Innovation in Education at the University of Liverpool.
Tia and Will, thank you so much for being here today. We worked together 2 or 3 years ago at the University of Liverpool, where we were responsible for, amongst other things, for introducing the Carpe Diem learning design methodology and starting to work with a range of faculty to change what was going on in what is essentially a research intensive place-based university on the whole. So I'd be fascinated to know, how's it going? How's it been in 2020 and what the plans are for 2021 from your point of view? So who's going first? Will, would you like to start?
Well, yeah, certainly it's been a quite a monumental year, hasn't it, for everybody, really? But certainly within our job role at the University of Liverpool, it's been very, very busy. Probably within the learning design area, probably the busiest experience we've ever had with this, really. I mean, obviously, in previous years, we've used learning design methodologies with you, Gilly, and it's been, well-rehearsed strategy with particularly innovators or teaching teams looking to innovate and change how they do things. But this year, we've definitely perceived, obviously, an increased interest amongst lecturers and program teams within learning design. So really taking time out to think about how carefully how they do things, moving into this new heavily virtualized teaching experience that we've now got at universities. So, circumstances really has forced people to start to review the processes that they use in their teaching and how they do things, not necessarily to change things, but to maybe review things and refine them within the new. Often, people are approaching this and it's, how are they going to change things to make it work online. So it's often working with those staff to help them to kind of design through things a bit more carefully this year, to think about the student activity, the particular challenging circumstances that students are going to have, and then refine their learning design model for it. Is that how you see it as well, Tia?
Yeah, it's just also like we spend lots of time sitting with people and helping them think, if that makes sense, because many of our colleagues, even us, sometimes when we think about shifting to online, we want to translate exactly what we have to online. But when we sat, we were thinking, does it translate? And we were thinking about, as you mentioned, with the way we designed it to make sure it works for everybody, and that took a good amount of time, didn't it?
Yeah. I think people just often are quite used to kind of working in their offices by themselves and thinking just on that week's challenges, how is that going to work? And like you say, Tia, they'll come up against challenges and they'll, that'll kind of be a wall they can't get around. But what we're finding is often when we're working with staff, even virtually now on their storyboards, what we're often finding is that we can help them think around those problems or maybe identify new opportunities that this presents, often through technology.
So have you found storyboarding one of the best vehicles for working together on these kind of things?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. We actually used something like a storyboard that we use with you, and CIE started using another one with 12 weeks kind of calendar style to plan it. It has the same characteristic, but because it looks like a calendar and it looks like what many of our academic colleagues work with, it's kind of easier because they kind of scaffold. So they know how it works. So when they sit with us, then we inject other things. We make them think about other aspects. And if Will and I helping them, we suggest to talk to the librarians, as Will said, working with other people. And another thing we try to kind of bring up is, if you spend 2 hours teaching face to face, it cannot be 2 hours teaching online. So you have to change that. And how are you going to change it? So that kind of conversations are so I think they teach me a lot. And so evocative for both parties, us and them. So the storyboarding is kind of, I think, gives everybody a kind of structure for thinking. I don't know.
So really, you're saying you're using the storyboard a bit like a timetable.
Yeah.
So they go through 'em, but then you've got to have all the various components.
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah. But often they haven't really put it down on paper recently, you know, particularly under these new circumstances. The action of putting it down on paper, you know, all we give them is a blank piece of paper at the start of it, really. There's nothing else. But we're giving them the opportunity, and also the opportunity to think about, why don't you show that bit of paper to other people's within your department and get second opinions. So like Tia says, they're mapping out week by week what student activities, what learning activities there's going to be week by week. And then that starts to provide kind of a list of resources that they might want to look at concentrating on developing. You know, maybe they can't develop all 12 weeks to begin with, but maybe they might look at the first 3 weeks and developing resources for those. They can then start to factor in any problems there might be. You know, it might be that students join later on in the module, or they're going away doing something out, and they can only fit certain number of people maybe within the lab space. So these type of problems they can kind of work through, and that's really where we find encourage them to work with their colleagues, or like TSA librarians, or even learning technologists to get involved and help them think through, or maybe even just talking to someone else who's even from a different discipline completely. There might be opportunities for thinking around these problems, and we are definitely finding that lecturers are finding new ways of doing things that they wouldn't have otherwise considered, and these are definitely practices that they're going to take forward into the future. So for example, they might have been getting students to work in small groups in a great big hangar with students working in small groups physically, but now they're using maybe a virtual team working platform like Microsoft Teams, and there is a lot of extra kind of soft skill development around that. So and that's
So
something that, you know,
what you're talking about is beyond the learning outcomes into the emergent properties, and shock horror, sometimes if it's well designed could even be better than what they were doing before. Do you think? Is that possible?
I think it might be, because we talk about problems, but I sat in some curriculum designed this process. New programs go through the validation and revalidation, and now because we have a taste of teaching online and we see the opportunities, there's a talk about placement in different countries, like virtual placement. No one would have thought about this before. Now we can. And then guest lecturers, so we can bring that global citizenship into our teaching far easier. We did have all of these technologies, but we just didn't think about how to utilize them. Now, because we had to use them, it kind of broadened our horizon, and we can think about very innovative approaches. And I find that so exciting, because it makes my job exciting as well. So it's a bit of selfish reason, and it changes the future.
Up. Super, really, you know, I mean, I suppose we'd call them emergent properties of what you're having to do anyway. And what about the students? Do you know how they're responding when some of these things get delivered?
Because for first semester and all of it's not just about the teaching and technology and how we moved online. It's also the environment around us, which uncertainly I think has massive impact. So we did have mixed responses. But one of the things Will mentioned, we delivered a session for one of our faculty that they have lots of group work. And they were very set that these group works, they have to be face-to-face and they have to be this way, but they couldn't be. So we talked about how to run them in Microsoft Teams, and they ran them and they went so well. They got back to us to praise us and thank us, and they said it's actually increased the student engagement, something they didn't think it was going to happen. And it was
a real
so
achievement here.
Yeah,
real achievement. And we're starting to get reports on this about, it's not so bad. And that's where you're going towards sustainability, isn't it, over time? And also it's starting to shift people towards thinking about the student experience so much more, which is so needed.
It's sort of facilitating, in that particular example, it's facilitating group work, which otherwise lecturers might be a bit turned away from. You know, they think it's very resource intensive, but you've now got a situation where it's kind of making it group work much more accountable as well, because you can lift the lid on the meetings. You can see what minutes the students have completed in teams, you know, what kind of the actions of meetings are. You know, students are very much more kind of accountable about what they've discussed and what action planning they're doing. So it's, there definitely some, you know, and also it's changing the assessment as well. So where they might have used more of an exams previously, they're now probably thinking about, well, how can I assess some of these emergent outcomes as well? You know, and they're thinking more about, rather than you know, the actual you know, action of students working in groups, how can we assess that as an additional?
Wow, that's real progress if they're rethinking assessment, and you
Yeah.
should be quite proud of your
Well,
work on
well,
all of that.
well, but they're still got the same learning outcomes. So they're really coming back to their core purpose, which is, we've got a, you know, we've got a module on designing products. What are the important things we need to assess here? And it might well be working in virtual teams is a very useful skill to have when the students go into the workplace.
And that's key design thinking, isn't it? Really,
Mm.
to start with the end in mind, to consider the users. You know,
Yeah.
so you're really leading people through a design thinking process, I think, in doing that, but also giving them some practical tips of how to deliver, which is all important. So, so just to sum up then, so I'm going to ask each of you, what are the plans for 2021, where it seems that we've still got to keep doing more of this, and we need to do it fast and also to scale up? Any ideas? Any tips on that, Will?
Well, me and Tia have been very kind of instrumental this year, if I may say so myself, on making communities of practice at the university. Right. So we've set up, we're also moving to a new virtual learning environment called Canvas. So lots of staff are utilising this new environment, and we've set up a community of practice where people meet every week, and we have about 80 people who are active members, but we've probably got about 400 other members actually. And they're not only talking about the tool, but they're also sharing their practices amongst departments as well. So it's really nice to get that cross university collaboration. So that's going to be this community of practice, particularly as we're all you know, we're all housebound at the moment. We're all in our individual silos. So having something where we can all get together and talk about stuff, and even to, you know, sometimes, you know, share how things really aren't working, and learning from those can be really, really useful. So I think that's going to be one of our key tools going forwards.
It's nothing like using the tool that you're going to use with your students, because
yes, that's true.
It's baby steps towards being a student yourself online.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, well, that's great. It sounds wonderful. Tia, do you want to add anything to that? 2021.
Yeah, I think this year, because I feel that 2020 we were trying to survive, so we put the foundation down. But I think we need to understand that design is not a linear process, it's cyclic. So we have to go back, get the student feedback and improve it. And one element that I think is the biggest challenge for us is assessment. I can see some of our colleagues are moving to really creative, different kind of assessment.
Yeah.
But I think we are going to focus more on assessment. And I do think this change in assessment is going to stay with us. And we are going to have it in the future as well. But I know that lots of our colleagues design their courses, design their teaching, but I think they are going to revisit it.
Yeah.
And they change it and make it better. And I'm quite excited to see how those courses are going to evolve.
I mean, sometimes, you know, with assessment, people have professional bodies they have to satisfy. But really, you know, the next couple of years, how are we going to allow students to reflect upon this point of time that's unique in our history and learn from it? And maybe through doing exams might not be the ideal way of getting students to think upon those things. So, you know, and obviously that's going to be the whole way through the education sector as well in the UK, not just at university level. So, yeah, I think so too, Tia, around those challenges. How can we really take the most educational value out of this period of time so that we're better prepared, hopefully, in the future?
Yeah.
Well, can I say thank you very much? I think there's more challenges to go, and hopefully we can talk to you again soon. But can I say thank you very much for your time, your expertise and your insights, which are amazing. And can I wish you all the very best throughout 2021 with this fantastic work you're doing. It was really
thank
great
you.
to talk to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And thanks for
Great.
listening, everyone. We'll put some resources in so you can follow up on some of the things that Will and Tia have been talking about. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Stay safe.
Thanks so much for watching today's video. I will put in the description box below the video any kind of information that we think that will be useful for you. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. You can go to our website at educationalchemists.com. Look forward to seeing you here again soon.